Hi, folks, and welcome to the Gold Hoops and God podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Guerra, and today I have a fantastic guest. I'm here with Carla Santamaria. Hi, Carla.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yay! Thank you for being here today. So I'm super excited to talk with Carla, and we'll dive right in. We'll get into it. So each week on the podcast, I always like to start off with talking about culture and identity, especially because even the term Latina or Hispanic or Latine, it's so broad and people feel different ways about it, right? I actually just saw a clip de Dolores Huerta of United Farm Workers fame, and she was not a big fan. Very interesting. She had feelings about those terms, right? And so that is to say that these terms are loaded in a way, right? Like they mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And so I always like to ask my guests, like, how do you see yourself, right? Like, how do you like to self-identify?
Thank you so much for asking that
Yeah.
because just like Honduras, like I am from Honduras.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, I'm also from Miami. Like, depending on the context, you're like, oh, where are you from? Like, oh, I'm from Miami. But like, oh, where are you from? I'm from Honduras.
Right.
And even I actually started including my bio. It's like Carla Santamaria is a Miami raised, Honduran born, like yada, 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 like all of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And thinking about what you said about Latinidad, when I
Mm-hmm.
moved to the United States, I think this term was given to me. And I don't know if I ever really, that's not true. I did question it. I was going to say, I don't know if I ever really questioned it, but I think I
Mm-hmm.
definitely did. I
Mm-hmm.
definitely started questioning it maybe right before the pandemic or at some point,
Mm-hmm.
maybe like I finished graduate school in 2019,
Mm-hmm.
about a year before the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
So, like I remember being in COVID and like really leaning in into being like Centroamericana, and like connecting with like
I love
other
it.
Centroamericanas.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I did question it, but I moved to the US when I was 8. Like it was a
Wow.
month shy of my ninth birthday. So I was a kid.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when I moved to the US, they told me I was Latina and Hispanic and or Latino. And I was like, okay, great. Like I didn't really question it
Right.
until 20 years later. And I was like, wait, hold on.
Mm.
I'm Hondureña. I am from Miami. I'm a Miami girl. I'm also Latina. So
I
Honduran
love it.
American, Centroamericana, that's all
Cara.
me.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Yeah. So I similarly, right? So I grew up in Los Angeles, like the heart of LA, Koreatown, shout out K Town. Uh, that's a thing, right? And so identity, right? So it's not only, thank you for mentioning that. So it's not only the cultural identity, but it's also the culture of a city, of a town, of a state, right? So there's that piece. And I'm also Central American. I'm Guatemalan on my mom's side and Ecuadorian on my dad's side. So I always like to say, like, I'm from the Americas, right? North, Central, and South. But
Nice.
that's super cool. I love it. So, oh, it's so fascinating. So you grew up, well, as a little girl, you were in Honduras.
Yes, absolutely. I was,
Amazing.
yeah, born in Honduras.
Wow. Do you still remember a little bit of like certain things? Like, and what city were you, if you don't mind sharing, what city did you grow up in?
Yeah, of course. So I grew up in San Pedro, which is not the capital, but I was almost going to say that. And I was like, yeah, which
Oh,
is the capital. It's like the economic capital, I would
okay.
say,
Mm-hmm.
because
Interesting.
it's very close to Cortes, which is the biggest port in Central America. So thank
Mm.
you so much for asking me. Nobody ever asked me details about Honduras, so I can, yeah,
Really? No, man.
yeah. So
That's so crazy. That's so crazy. I again, like you were saying, like as I've gotten older, I've gotten like way more, I have to admit, way more passionate about like Central American identity specifically because everything gets kind of like lumped in with other identities, I will say I still feel like Mexican American, Puerto Rican, and Cuban are such, and I love my people. They're very strong identities, right? Very strong. And so when you're not part of those groups, for example, I've noticed this with Central Americans, we kind of get like sort of left out, And I've seen this shift, or rather, an intentional uh embracing, I'll say that, an intentional embracing by a lot of different folks to highlight Central American identity, Salvadoran identity, Honduran, Guatemalan, Costa Rican, right, etc. So it's good. I think it's good and it's important. agree with you. It's important to point it out because it makes a difference.
Yes, it absolutely does. I mean, and to answer your original question, yes, I remember being a kid in Honduras. A lot of my memories, though, like when I again, I realized in the last few years,
Hmm.
maybe 10 years ago, that when I talk about Honduras, I have to like remind folks, and I'm like, listen, I moved to the US when I was 8. Okay, so you're getting the
Yeah,
perspective of a child, of
a
a
little
very
kid.
young
Yeah,
child. Yeah.
yeah,
So
totally.
as I talk about that, and I've had the opportunity to go back a couple of times.
Mm,
But yeah, definitely, like I'm also very much leaning into like my Central American identity, and even like
hmm.
what you talked about, like some identities are bigger. In Miami, the
Yeah,
dominant culture is Cuban culture.
all the way,
Yeah, and
totally.
there was like so
Hmm.
many words that are different, so many
Hmm.
phrases that are different. And
Yeah.
then when I first left Miami, like when I spent time in DC, when I spent time in Utah, and
Hmm.
everybody was like asking, oh my God, when I lived in Utah, my white roommate's mom happened to be like visiting or something, and I was cooking, and she
Uh
leaned over the stove and was like,
oh.
is that what they make in Mexico? And then I kind of just looked at her and said, I don't know, I'm not from Mexico. Like it was just
Good for
so.
you.
Thank
It's
you.
it's classic though, right? Like it's a classic like scenario that people, alas, people are so ignorant, for really, for lack of a better word, like they just don't know. They're just unawares. And it's so true. Yeah, exactly. Isn't it amazing? Travel. I always am telling people, travel, as much, just get out of your comfort zone, see something else, visit other places, learn about other people. Um, yeah, it's so true. Like I really appreciate you sharing that experience of being in Utah. Very interesting. Yeah. Oh man. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's so fascinating. Let's see. So yeah, so Central America, and I love that you're kind of like embracing that knowledge of being Honduran. And you mentioned, have you gone back to visit and stuff like over the years?
Yes. So while we were in the process of becoming US citizens, we
Hmm.
didn't visit. Uh,
Mm.
I think the first time I went back to visit Honduras was actually in 2016.
Oh
My
wow.
flight was maybe like the day after the election. It
Oh
was
my gosh.
devastating. I was like crying on this airplane, crying in
Oh.
like my cousin's truck when they picked us up, and then I was like at a game, and La Selección Nacional was playing, and I was like waving
Hmm.
a Honduran flag, and I'm like, man, these people would have
Mm.
never known that I was like sobbing about the US election. So yeah, so
Yeah.
I got the opportunity to
Wow.
go back. I've been back maybe like 2 or 3 times, definitely not as often as I would have liked.
Yeah.
But yes, I have, and it's so beautiful, and it really
Yeah.
shows me. It's just like, huh? Had my parents made a couple of different choices, what would my life have looked like?
Yeah, I think about that all the time. I totally think about that all the time. Like, what would my life have looked like if they hadn't left, right? Or my grandparents hadn't left, vice versa, right? Um, it's interesting. It's really, really interesting. Something that I find fascinating too is how like a lot of I guess like our generation or even like the parent generation, many people like once they retire, they're getting ready to retire, they go back
Hmm.
or they buy like a second, like a second little home or apartment or something to go to, in the plans of going back, right? It's almost like, okay, we did the US thing, our kids are good, they're growing, they went to school, they did all that stuff, and now we're going to go home. It's so fascinating. I've seen that pattern quite a bit. It was a lot of different communities, but especially with like Latin American, Caribbean families.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it might be. I mean, I guess it depends, or at least in my experience, my
Hmm.
parents were very young when they started their family.
Mm.
They ultimately got divorced. My mom married somebody else,
Mm.
and what's actually funny, and sorry mom for putting your business out there, but it was actually somebody that she knew in high school, and so they reconnected after her divorce, and then
Oh,
he moved
wow.
to the US to marry my mom. And I think if I were to
Interesting.
ask each of them, like, hey,
Mhm,
where do you see your golden years, my mom would be
mhm,
like, here in the US con mis hijas,
mhm.
and
With my
then
kids, of
her
course, yeah.
husband, yeah, and then her husband would say like in Honduras. So I don't know. I
Oh,
mean,
interesting, yeah.
I'm gonna ask them,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
I'm gonna be, let me just stir some drama. No, I'm just kidding.
Right, right, right,
But
right, right.
yeah, like I think, yeah, and so I think, to your original point, it might,
Mhm,
at least in my experience, it might be tied to at what age they came to the United States.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
like
yes.
my mom and my dad came to the US in their 20s
Wow.
versus, you know, a decade and a half later, my
Yeah.
mom's current husband came to the US. So, you know, I think it
It
just
depends.
depends.
Totally. Yeah, totally. My dad came to the US from Ecuador. It's funny, originally originally to visit his mom and his younger siblings, but he met like the neighbor family, the family that lived across the street, which was my mom's family that she grew, her parents and siblings and stuff. And they liked each other, they fell in love. And so my dad never really he I think he might have gone back once to just to like, figure everything out. But that was it. They fell in love and they got married, and then I came along and my brother came along. He Yeah, it's fascinating. My grandfather, so my dad's father, he visited the US and he's like, hated it. He's like, nada que ver. He was like, no, thank you. He was so upset. And this is spilling the tea too. He was so upset with how, in his mind, how Americanized my aunts were. They're going out, they're wearing these short skirts. Oh no, like this is catastrophe, right? And so he's like, yo me regreso a mi país. He's like, goodbye. I have my business in Ecuador. I'm
Mhm.
leaving. And it's crazy. Like, anyway, that's it. I'm so fascinated by the journey, right? The story, like people's stories, migration stories, like love lost, relocating, reconnecting. I find all of that so amazing. Because human beings are fascinating. Like
Oh, yes.
our choices, right? Like our choices and our rationales and things like that. It's so interesting. It's true. I think that family connection, wanting to be, especially like wanting to be near the grandchildren, right? If there's grandchildren involved, then it's like, oh, I want to be close by and things like that. So that's very cool. All right. So along with culture, I always like to touch upon the topic of like religion, spirituality, because again, like Latinas, we have so many different practices, right? Some are religious, some are more spiritual, some are into curanderismo and like healing and, sweat lodges and all these different things. And so I'm curious, Carla, if you don't mind sharing a little bit of like, um, yeah, like how you see, the spiritual world, or if you practice any particular like religious tradition.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
So I was actually raised Mormon.
Mm,
So I grew up Latter-day Saints. I grew up
mhm,
telling people it's not a cult. I grew up thinking I was going to marry a returned missionary in the temple. Uh, and then
mhm.
I left Mormonism. I actually had a really, I mean, it was kind of, it was two things. It was like a slow burn.
Wow.
And as I was kind of going through my own process of realizing that that belief system was so oppressive,
Mm,
um, but being scared to leave.
right.
Then, you know, I had like the situation that kind of was the catalyst,
Mhm,
and I'll
mhm.
share about that in a second. But
Yeah.
so yeah, so I grew up with like the Mormon LDS faith belief
Mhm,
system. The missionaries came to
mhm,
Honduras, and my mom had
mhm.
actually, that's actually how her and her husband knew each other. They had gone to seminary together in high school.
Wow.
But
Wow.
then, so my mom got baptized when she was in high school, and then she stopped going. She
Oh.
married my dad, you know, like, but then at some point when I was a kid, you know, the missionaries found her, and then we
Wow.
started going to church. So I very
Interesting.
much like was Mormon in Honduras, and then I was Mormon in Miami when I moved to the
Mm.
United States. And you know, all throughout college, like that was all of my upbringing. And I even considered,
Really?
yeah, like going through a Mormon mission. I definitely believed that we were God's chosen people and that only the Mormons were going to heaven. Oh my gosh. Sometimes I look back at like my friends or my family, and especially my sister. I have three sisters, I was sharing earlier. The
Mhm,
sister who is right after me in birth
mhm.
order, she left the Mormon church when she was 18. She was like,
Oh.
peace out, y'all. And I
Mhm.
was like super
Well, that's
judgy.
interesting.
Yes, I was
Oh,
like
because
super
that even
judgy.
within like your siblings, there was like a different, right? Like a different feeling towards it all. Wow,
Oh
interesting.
yeah, no,
Mm.
100%. And
Wow.
so I just think back to, I mean, there was a lot of things about Mormonism, but like really, like sometimes like the way that I put the church before
Mhm.
my family, before my sister,
Oh,
she and I live, you
interesting.
know,
Oh,
like
wow.
that's one of the things that like causes me the most pain. And then sometimes, with my girlfriends that we met in college, I was Mormon, and then they teased me, and I was like, all right, I'm sorry. Like, thank you for still being my friend when I was like insufferable.
Oh, oh my
you
gosh.
know? Yeah. So that's the belief system.
Mhm.
And again, like, I think it was actually around maybe 2015.
Mm.
So yeah, so you know what? It was
Wow, interesting.
¿cómo se llama? I hate talking about the convicted felon that is now the president. But when he
Mm.
initially had his uh, campaign launch, or when he announced his campaign, the first thing that he
Mhm.
did was say, like, Mexicans are rapists,
Mhm.
And
They're not
to
sending their best. Yeah.
right,
Absolutely.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And the
Absolutely.
thing is,
It was wild. Yeah. It was.
and I just couldn't believe it. And at that moment is
Mhm.
when I started realizing how much internalized, like how much the Mormon church was built on racism. And like
Ooh.
it was 100%. And even though like at some point like
Yeah.
earlier, and I was just like, are these missionaries going to other countries and like preaching the Mormon faith instead of like telling them that their indigenous practices are bad? So I was kind
Mhm.
of already like thinking
Mhm.
like, are Mormon missionaries
Yeah.
like cultural imperialists? So I was kind of already having those thoughts.
Mhm.
But I always like the doctrine, like the quote unquote official doctrine of the Mormon church is like, we believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Like
Mhm.
we believe that men are going to be like like the families are forever, that men have
Mhm.
like all men, and even that I didn't even notice that it says all men, not men and women, not everyone, just men are going
Right.
to go to heaven and responsible for their own actions, believing in free will, like these
Mhm.
really beautiful things that I held on to. And I
Sure.
always
Yeah.
say, like, I left Mormonism for the same reason that I stayed Mormon. It's because
Mm.
the values of being kind, like being
Yeah.
charitable, being
Yeah.
Christ-like, the way that Christ is written in the Bible. Like,
Mhm.
I think those values are beautiful. But
Totally.
in practice, the
Yeah.
Mormon church is like so corrupt and so like it's oppressive, and it's designed to protect sexual predators. So in 2015 is when I was
Mm.
started having like seeing all the racism and like all these people, and I'm like, hold on, how are you
Yeah.
supporting this literal rapist while you are
Uh,
saying that you believe in like saving yourself until marriage and whatnot,
mhm.
and
Right, right,
like
right. Yeah.
and it just was so baffling to me because he is so anti-Christ like, and like it was just so contradictory to the teachings of
Yeah.
Christ as I understood Christ. and
Yeah.
uh and anyway, so fast forward to 2017, I actually ended up being harassed and stalked by a fellow congregant. It's
Oh,
kind of
no.
horrible. It was kind of
Oh.
awful. When I turned to my leaders, they turned their backs on me. They were
Mm.
like,
They
it
blamed
was,
you.
yes. Oh
They
my God.
flipped it on you. Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
Yep.
Yeah. So that is, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know
Victim
what? That
blaming.
wasn't
Oh my
even
gosh.
100%.
It's
Like,
the
that's
worst.
when I realized how oppressive it was.
Yeah.
I ended up
That's
writing my
terrible.
entire master's thesis on my religious affiliation. I have like,
Wow.
yeah, so it was a lot, but it had
Well,
been a
good for you
slow
though.
burn.
You know what I
Thank
mean?
you.
For taking the opportunity from in other words, like from an academic standpoint to be like, no, I'm gonna dive in. I'm gonna unpack this right now. Like there's more to the story, right? That's really powerful. Good for you,
100%.
Carla. Good
Thank
for
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes. It really, as like difficult as it was,
Mhm.
it really gave me language, because
Mhm.
it's like what was I was experiencing, it was like the loss of faith, the loss of community,
Yes.
and I remember
Yeah.
that slow burn. At some point I remember thinking like, if this isn't true, and not true as in like true or false, but true as in like the truth,
Mhm.
then my entire life is a lie. And I
Mm.
remember
Yeah.
not wanting to like stop believing. And even like
Yeah.
if like even when I think about the moment that I finally realized that I'm out, it was like
Mhm.
8 or 9 months after this like incident of
Process.
stalking and
Yeah.
harassment.
Yeah.
And I remember I just saw something about, because ultimately Mormons believe in polygamy, and I was there thinking like, this can't be true. And again, true is in the truth. And then
Mhm.
I remember thinking like, if this is not the truth, then none of it is. And I just felt so much
Mm.
peace. And
Wow.
I remember the moment that I decided to leave Mormonism, like I remember like where I was standing. And I had this thought, because Mormonism teaches you that God knows your heart and your soul. And I
Mhm.
remember thinking, if God really does know my heart and my soul,
Mhm.
then he is going to know why I had to leave this organization.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was, I want to say
That's
2018.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah, thank
absolutely.
you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was 2018, and it was,
Wow.
yeah, definitely like very challenging. And then
Mhm.
so I'm gonna pause
Can
there
imagine.
because then I have to go through like my own journey of I, healing from that, and
Yeah.
then eventually reconnecting to a
Mhm.
higher power.
That's amazing. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it's like I don't think people realize like how traumatic these things can be, right? So for example, I'm thinking of people who are Jehovah's Witness or ex-Jehovah's Witness, things like that. Like you really do get cut off. Like I don't think people understand that. Like when you step away or you kind of like publicly make it known that you're not really going to be in anymore, it's a problem. Like people actually, you're right. Like people do actually lose their community, their family members, like friends. Like it's icy, like it can be really brutal. And I don't think people understand that because it's like, oh, just don't go anymore. Just leave. No, no, no. It's way more complicated than that. And yeah, I really appreciate you sharing everything that you shared. And that's the thing, right? I think that that's something that's so, for me, like so disheartening is the way in which, like, for lack of a better word, like organized religion really takes off in this whole direction that makes things very difficult for women, for people who are queer, for it's just, in other words, like a lot of the foundations, unfortunately, are so patriarchal, are so misogynistic and hierarchical right, quote unquote, in organized religion, that it's very hard to sift through that. It's really hard to like kind of sift out the, like you were saying, like the truth, like there are, and that's the thing, right? And similarly, I've had to kind of reconcile myself with being Catholic. Like I was, baptized Catholic. I did my confirmation, everything like that. I did my PhD in systematic theology. For folks who don't know me very well or personally, yeah, my degree is in systematic theology. I spent the majority of my higher education thinking about God. Like it's the study of God, literally, right? And so trying to reconcile like all the things that, alas, the Catholic Church has done in history, also known as colonization throughout the Americas, like it's really tough, um and so that is to say, I really appreciate you sharing that journey and the challenges that come in trying to basically make sense of it all, right? Make sense of like, okay, what have I been taught? What do I believe? Who is God for me, right? Like, how do I understand God or my relationship with a higher power? And that too, actually, that too, even the word God, right? The word God is so loaded. Speaking of
Yes.
loaded terms, right? Like, I feel like if we did a poll of 500 people, define God, what does God mean to you? We would get 500 answers. Like, I don't think anybody has the exact precise definition that I don't think that because all of us are different, right? Like all of us have had these different lived experiences, different childhoods, different education, that it's it's so much more complicated than that. So
Yes,
I really
100%.
appreciate you sharing.
Of course, yeah, happy to. And it's so interesting because when you said if we were to ask 500 people, I really thought you were going to say like what, like 499 of them are going to say like he. And it's so interesting because even as I was telling my story, and I was like, I don't use the pronoun he for God
I
anymore.
try not to.
Like, and
Yeah.
what you said, like,
Yeah.
who am I outside of religion? Like
Mhm.
who am I?
Mhm.
What do I believe in? There were
Mhm.
some things that were so hard for me. For
Mhm.
years, I couldn't
Mhm.
journal. I couldn't journal because
Oh, wow.
Mormonism teaches you that you need to journal and it's so important. And I was like, no, like
Wow.
F
Oh,
that. I'm
I
not
see, I
gonna
see, I see.
journal, you know.
So you're pushing
And
back against the journaling. I see, I see.
yeah,
Mhm.
so I was
Mhm.
pushing back because I was like, I'm not gonna do it because that's a Mormon thing.
You were
But I
feeling
didn't,
forced. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was like
Mhm.
so against anything and everything Mormon.
That you were
Um,
told about before, like you were taught
yes,
to do before. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
then, like eventually again through like my own process and like healing
Yeah.
journey, and I'm like, I can journal. Like,
It's okay.
it's
Yeah.
not Mormon.
Yeah. Do it
Even
your
a
own
broken
way.
clock. Yes.
Yes, do it your
Yes.
own way. How like approach it how you want to approach it. It doesn't have to be like, the way that they were teaching you. That's
Yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah.
the indoctrination runs deep.
It's intense.
Like I
Yeah.
actually, as we're recording this, it's April.
Mhm.
Maybe last week I woke up and I looked at the time on my phone and it said, like Sunday, April 6th. And I said to my fiance, oh, it's Mormon Jesus's birthday. Like it's something so random as looking at the date
What?
and
Oh my
thinking, yeah, I'm
gosh.
pretty sure that the Mormons think that Jesus was born on April 6th. But anyway, I don't
Oh
know
my
why.
goodness.
So it's, yes, so random. Like it is,
Oh
and again,
man.
like even the things of like white supremacy, like I'll be watching, I remember I was watching some show and they showed like the antagonist. They were a white supremacist group and they were singing
Mm.
Battle Hymn of the Republic. And I'm like, I know that hymn in two languages. Like, why am I knowing this white
Oh,
supremacist
interesting.
anthem in English and
Wow.
in Spanish? Yeah, so
Wow.
indoctrination, yeah, like indoctrination
That's
and white
super interesting.
supremacy, totally
Mhm.
deep. But, as again, like I left and I think I would say, very firmly atheist for about a year.
Mm. Mhm.
And then, and then I realized, and I was like, actually, I don't think I was atheist. I think I was definitely agnostic. I remember sharing with someone who was atheist, and I was like, I can't be sure that there's nothing out there because I know what it's like to be sure of what higher power looks like and then
Mhm.
have that truth
Mhm.
be ripped away. So I really
Right.
can't be sure of anything, like
Yes, you know?
so that was kind of my
Seriously.
conclusion.
Seriously. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I mentioned, I was raised Catholic, but I actually have people in my life that are Mormon, like they're practicing Mormon. And so, right, so I also, shall we say, I also have to like leave room and be respectful. Do you know what I mean? Because like
Hmm.
they're right. Does that mean, I think you'll know where I'm going with this. It's like they're people that I respect and that I'm close to, and they practice, right? And their faith is very important to them, and they attend, church and things like that. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating though. It's really interesting. Yeah. Oh man, religion. Religion's so
Yes,
intense.
100%. And I do, and I understand that. Like I
Yeah.
definitely leave room for that as well. I mean, I have
Hmm.
three sisters. My older
Your
sister is
family.
very
Yeah.
much, yeah, like a practicing Latter-day Saint,
Oh wow.
and we just don't talk about it, And
Yeah.
I again, I know what it's like to have my religious organization be very important to me,
Yes.
and so like I can understand that, and I
Yeah.
can like have my views about the Mormon Church as an oppressive organization, and
Mm.
not hold those same views towards the people who are being kind to their neighbors, towards the
Right.
people who are just like trying to be like their understanding of Christ. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Now,
Exactly.
don't get me wrong, like the Trump supporting like Mormons, I'm like, I got another thing to say to you. Sorry. This is, different
It's tough.
ideologies. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah,
It
I
is.
also
Yeah.
hold space for that.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, and I think this is kind of, I mean, it's there in a lot of the major denominations, the Christian denominations. Like the white supremacy is there, like it's
Oh yeah.
there, and not very hidden either. Like it doesn't take much to scope it out. Like it's very much active. And that's, again, like very disheartening, because I don't think that Jesus would actually hate other people of different religions or other races and things like that. So
Right. No, I
yeah.
I agree. I think that Jesus, as written in the New Testament,
Mm.
is a pretty cool dude.
I agree.
Yeah,
I
yeah, like
agree. I agree.
right, and and
You
the thing that
know?
is so baffling about that is that like this figure of Christ would be a
Hmm.
radical leftist in in
Yes.
today's
In
U.S.
today's, yeah,
politics.
yes, yes, yes,
And it's
yes.
like this is a Palestinian man. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
This is a political refugee. This is somebody who gave to the poor, who like supported them
Hmm.
instead of giving money
Yeah.
to billionaires. So I yeah, and again, I know that like the Bible is necessarily, at least for me, like not necessarily a source of truth, but even if you read at this text, I'm just like,
Hmm.
where? And I look around, not just at the Mormons, but a lot of like religious fundamentalists that have aligned themselves with white supremacy.
Yeah,
And I'm just like,
yeah.
where is the Christ in your Christianity?
Right, exactly, exactly. Ooh, that's deep. It's so true though. I feel the same way. I'm like, are we reading the same thing? I'm like, I'm just like, did you get a different copy than I did? Because I'm not seeing it. Like I don't understand. It's true. Like, and especially when I'm teaching, I remind my students all the time. I'm like, look, it was about feeding the poor, clothing the naked, visiting those imprisoned, like those were actions that was called like taking care of one another, not just prayer is important, don't get me wrong, but there also is a sense of justice, social responsibility, community, something, so I agree with you. Yeah, yeah.
Also, I
It's
love that
fascinating.
you said that you spent your entire like doctorate like reading or studying about God, and I'm like, yeah, because it's
Yeah.
like I've also like I've
Yeah.
lived this, and like I also it was my master's degree, but I very much
Yeah.
studied religion as a concept,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true. It's like that's one thing for sure. Is like I know what I'm talking about in terms of like Catholicism
Yes, you do.
like at the very least, like I do know what I'm talking about. Um and so it's good. It's actually served me well even in teaching like ethnic studies, Central American studies because religion is so influential in our culture, right? Like what and I make it clear. I'm like, I'm not saying people are practicing, I'm not saying everybody's religious, I'm not saying everybody's going to church every weekend. No, I'm saying culturally, we are deeply, deeply influenced by Christianity, you know.
Mhm.
And so in terms of like looking at the history and things like that, it's cool. Like for example, like when we're talking about El Salvador, and you can't talk about El Salvador and the Civil War and that time period and not talk about Archbishop Saint actually now Archbishop Oscar Romero. Like it's all connected, right? So it's fun. It's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yay. Oh my gosh. This has been lovely, Carla.
Thank you.
So
Thank you
as
for
we
knowledge.
are yeah, this is super cool. This is amazing. And thank you for sharing so much about your um experience growing up and also, your experience with religion, because I know that can be a little bit, it's personal, and I appreciate you sharing what you have shared today. So, as we are wrapping up our session, I want to ask this question. So, I love to ask my guests about their inner niña. I'm big on this, right? Like, so I think that for us adults, it's so important to honor the inner child, to do things that make our inner child happy, and also, to share wisdom, right? To either share wisdom for young Latinas today or even like what we would have liked to have known when we were a little kid. So I will ask you that question. Like, what advice would you like to give? Either you can talk about both, and either advice for little Carla or just advice in general for young Latinas today.
This is a lot. And it's interesting because I've spent the last few weeks kind of in a spring
Mm,
after like a very long winter.
mm-hmm,
And I've been feeling this need to reconnect with myself and recreate and like create. And even just yesterday, I was working on a manifestation bingo card. Uh,
oh, cool.
so yeah, so I think I talked a lot about
That's
like my
fun.
religious upbringing, but I think where I am
Yeah.
right now, like I know that there is a higher power. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what that higher power looks like, like, and sometimes like when I pray, I address a non-binary creator of all beings,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
it's
Totally.
yeah. But anyway, as I was working on this manifestation bingo, I I got the idea from my friend Dr. Norma Reyes. Her platform is like the Manifesting Latina. So I went to her workshop, and she gave us a online, and it was like no, like I
Mm-hmm.
knew that I was called to do this by hand. Like but that's what I've
Uh-huh.
been feeling like connected,
Yeah.
and so I worked on it, and then I sent her a picture, and I told her, like at first I would like my perfectionism and criticism was getting the best of me,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm so glad that I learned that I let like my inner child, that little girl that just wanted to like play with
To
markers and
play.
color,
Mm-hmm.
Like I let her
Yeah.
take the lead, and it
Oh,
was
I
like
love
actually really fun.
it.
And
That's
so even
beautiful.
like, yeah, thank you. And like even just yesterday, which is why when you're asking this question right now, and I'm like, yeah, like literally
Hmm.
just yesterday, I felt like I was tapping into my inner child. And so, in the grand scheme of things, like I feel like there's a lot of things that I would want to tell her, like
Hmm.
it's not your fault your parents got divorced, like all these things that
Oh
kids
man.
take on, like I
Yeah.
just want to tell her, like, it's not your fault, like what,
So
just
heavy.
apply that in general,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
as the parentified child, I want to tell
Mhm.
her that a lot. It's not your fault, just like
Mhm.
as a blanket stamp in a lot of things.
Mhm. Mhm.
um
Wow.
and like
Yeah.
trust your intuition. I wish I could tell her
Mhm.
that too.
Huge.
Yeah,
Totally.
but
Mhm.
like, but if I think about like what's actually making a difference in my life right now, and what is something that is concrete, like an
Mhm.
action that she could take, I'd just be like, play. It's okay to play. It's
Mm.
okay to have fun.
Aw.
It's okay to color. It's okay to be, like to be silly, it's okay to be a kid, so
Mm.
that's definitely what I would tell
Wow.
her.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it. That's so amazing. It's true. I agree with you. So I think similarly, I feel like I had to grow up very fast. I feel like I was, parentified quite a bit because I'm the oldest daughter. And I think that part of my own like healing journey, etc., has been like to reconnect with my inner child. Like I buy Hello Kitty stuff all the time. I don't even care. I'm like, whatever. I'm 42. I don't care. I love Hello Kitty. Um, or even silly things like, a candy. I'm like, I randomly want like a Kit Kat or something. I'm gonna buy the Kit Kat. Things like that. It's true. Like coloring. I love coloring books. It's amazing because it's so healing, and I'm so glad that you mentioned intuition. I'm so glad that you took that initiative to work on the manifestation bingo, like on paper, like in a more physical form, versus like the screen or a virtual
Digital, yeah.
digital image. Yeah, so that's so cool. I love it. Aw, thank you, Carla.
Thank you. And yes,
Yay!
yeah, I mean, honestly, if you were to like look around my office, do you see all this pink? Do you see
I
the
love
pink
it.
shirt I'm wearing? Like it's all
I love it.
pink.
So
And
cute.
again, and that
Good
is
for
also
you.
like part of my healing, like when I
Yeah.
moved into my house, not the
Hmm.
first Halloween because we were still like unpacking, but the second Halloween, I decorated my entire house for
I love
Halloween.
it.
And I
I
was
love
like,
it.
this feels so healing to my inner child. So yeah,
I
so
love
that's what I
it.
would say to me as a, young person or anybody who is listening. Like it's okay to play, it's okay to have fun, it's
Hmm.
okay to like to just be creative and do
Yeah.
these things that we normally only allow children to do, because
Yes,
it is so
absolutely.
healing.
It is so healing. It's so important. You know what I mean? Like I think that all of us are so many of us, right, are so caught up in the grind, right? Caught up in the capitalism, right? In the work week, the capitalism, all of it. We're stressed. We're right. Like most. I feel like most adults in the U.S. are stressed, depressed, exhausted. That's so sad. Like we cannot, we cannot keep up like this. Like we cannot continue like this. And it's interesting. I think in little ways, like people have their meltdown. Do you know what I mean? I think that like actually, and dare I say, the pandemic forced us to stop. It
Mhm.
forced us full stop to slow down. And it was, I'm not saying it wasn't hard, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful for the loss, but I think that experience forced everyone to take stock of their life, to do like almost like a life review, like, what am I spending my time doing? What am I spending my weekends doing? What am I chasing? Right. In different ways. And so, you know,
Yeah.
it's amazing. I'm really happy that you shared that. Carla, you're awesome. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
This was a lovely, lovely conversation. Folks, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation with myself and with Carla Santamaria. Don't forget that the Gold Hoops and God podcast is available every Wednesday, everywhere that you listen to your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeart. And the video of the interview is available on YouTube. I post those videos Wednesdays at 1 Pacific time. So you can find those on YouTube too. Thank you so much, Carla.
Thank you so much for
Yay!
having me.
Bye. Thank you.